Grace. So glad you could join us here online. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend. A few brief announcements, and then we'll get right to the message this morning. First is that if you're giving today, you can do that online through our online giving portal at igrace.ca under the tab for giving. And if you are new watching online, you've been tracking maybe with us for a few weeks, checking out some of the messages, we'd love to invite you to fill out a Connect card, and you can do that through the website as well. There's a link right on the top of the screen, and that'll take you to our Connect card. We'll get your information. We'd love to send you a gift card from Starbucks just to say thanks for coming, and hopefully be able to follow up with you through the week and get a chance to invite you out formally, connect you with some people here, and I always love to meet you. A few other things. VBS is filling up. Please register online, even if it says there's a waiting list. It's coming up in end of July, and we're still sorting out some of the groups. We have a certain number of kids in each group that we can fit, and so there's a few age categories, and so as you register, you'll be able to choose that age category, but we're looking to try and fit as many people in as we can. So please do that online, and we'd love to see you there. And as well, if you're looking to help at VBS, you'd like to be a part of any of the kitchen staff or any with the groups, please get a hold of us. You can email myself or Lindsay or Kent, and all of our emails are on the website as well. Lastly, I wanted to alert you to the fact that we are doing a mission immersion program for grade 7 all the way to grade 12, and this will culminate in a year end trip next March break to Panama. And so we'd love to invite you to be a part of that. There's information online, as well as you can talk to Jason, our youth pastor, and he'll let you know how to apply for that to be a part of the Mission Immersion program. It's going to be awesome. We've done this before and are so excited about what God's going to do in the lives of our teens. Lastly, why don't we take a moment and pray before we jump into the sermon today, and we're talking about baptism. So let's pray. So God, we thank you this morning. We thank you for each person here. We pray, Lord, as we celebrate live in Fergus, we just pray that this would be a seed and encouragement to everyone of what you're doing in our midst, Lord, that you are awakening people to your reality and to who you are and to your great love and your truth. And so we just ask this morning together, Lord, that you'd open our hearts to hear your voice. In your mighty name, Jesus. Amen. Well, this morning we are privileged and thrilled to baptize in Fergus 3 incredible women, one of whom happens to be my daughter. And so this is of special importance to me, and just it's really such a privilege to be able to do that. And each of these 3 women are of different ages, and each have different stories. Each have walked quite different paths in life. And yet, like you and like me, they have found themselves here in this same place. At the same time, having arrived at the same beautiful conclusion that's alive in their hearts. And this is the conclusion that they've arrived at, that they cannot and they will not live this life apart from God any longer. They don't want to. They realize God matters more than anything else in their lives. And that they want to seek and discover his will and his plan for their lives above everything else. And it's been incredible watching God at work, drawing them. And I can testify in our own lives, of God drawing us in his kindness, of how God finds us when we are lost, how God loves us without conditions, as we are, and how God is at work welcoming each of us home into himself. And when that happens, when we are in the moment and sort of arrive at that place of realizing that God has called us and welcomed us and loved us, that moment of reception deserves a party every time. And that's why we're celebrating after the service this morning. And why we're going to get excited and cheer as they are baptized this morning, because it's something to celebrate. It's the most important moment of our lives. Now, if you're not familiar with baptism and what it's all about, the act of being baptized, which is when we're down in the water and we come back up, it's understood as an outward and symbolic action that reveals the inner work that God has already done in our hearts. We're enacting outwardly something that's happened inwardly through faith. But what exactly did happen in our hearts by faith? Well, baptism shows us that two separate things are happening in our lives by faith: a death and a birth. Or as some say, there was a funeral and a birthday all in one moment, from tomb to womb. But how exactly does all of that work? And what does it mean to have faith and to believe in some sort of funeral and some sort of birthday? And why are we enacting it? And so I'll try and just explain that, what it looks like to believe in God. Well, the first part, the first action of believing in God or having faith in God begins with us believing that our old identity, who we were before we met God, has died and been buried. Down into the grave goes an old way of living, and that old identity that we operated out of, and every part of our self-understanding that came and is tied to that old way. And that has to die. Now, the reason it has to die is that when we met God, when we started first maybe realizing the importance and the value and the reality of God, we came to see that this old identity that existed apart from God was actually insufficient, inadequate, and inferior for living the kind of life that's on offer. Specifically, it's insufficient, it's inadequate, it's an inferior because it was infected with sinful independence. And that's what sin is. Sin is the desire to live your life apart from God. That old life was also, because it was infected by sinful independence, it was enamored with all of the false promises that come with it. The false promises of self-reliance and self-effort. That you are what you do. You are what you achieve. You are what others think about you. You are the approval that you got, or the money that you have, or the place that you occupy in the world. And it also is empowered by pride. And we recognize that actually pride is actually one of the most ugliest and most warping things about life and about our character. Pride takes us away from people and hardens our hearts. And we grasped all of that. We made that kind of realization, whether it's that clear to you at this moment or not. We grasped that because when we looked at Jesus and we saw the way that he lived, the life that he lived, and we witnessed his dependence, his continual dependence on God, his beautiful humility. When we saw his power and his desire at work to restore and to heal people and the world, and when we heard the good news that he declared about God's grace, and we realized and sensed that he wasn't far off, but his love was near to us, when we saw Jesus, we all became undone by wonder, and we get opened up to a new truth. And this new truth is that the old identity has never and will never be able to bring us into this life. It's like owning a mansion and then camping our whole lives on the front yard. There's this offer here, but we live outside of it. When we see Jesus, we realize that the whole old way of living, that pride and independence and self-effort and striving lives under and is infected with the curse of sin, which ultimately leads us to death. The Bible says it clearly, the wages of sin, the ultimate payment for participating in independence from God is death. Not that God desires that, but that's what it leads to. Accordingly, by faith in baptism, we confess, man, we don't want to live like that any longer. We don't want to live that way or according to those values for a second. We want to live for God. And we want God to live with us. We want to be reconnected. We don't want to wait until the end of our lives to die. We want to die to that old way of life right now. So we follow Jesus into the death that he died presently. We die now to a life apart from God. That's the choice every one of us who's seen Jesus desires to make. If that's the way it looks, if that's what life looks like, then I want to do it now. And to do it, I need to let go of this old life. And all this talk about death, I know, can sound quite dark until you realize that death is simply the setup for the second action of faith. Remember, faith is two parts. It's death and it's being raised up. For though we die now, we choose to let go of our old identity. We die in Christ. That's what we follow him. And so we do so in the great expectation that he will raise us up. And we believe that because we know that the story of Jesus is that while he died for sin on our behalf, he was raised up. And the promise is that anybody who dies now, before they die before they die, they'll be raised up just as he was raised up. Romans 4, if you have a Bible, you can turn there. Romans 6, verse 4 says this. It says essentially this in Paul's words. He says, we were buried, therefore, with him by baptism into death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we shall surely be united with him in a resurrection like his. We know that our old self was crucified with him in order that the body of sin might be brought to nothing, so that we would no longer be enslaved to it, no longer be enslaved to those old thoughts, those old ways, that old reality. It says, for the one who's died to sin has been set free from it. So for those being baptized today, and maybe for you, if you're thinking about what it would mean to live for God and to have that new life, we can be assured that if we die in him now by faith, we too will be raised up to new life. There is something beautiful on the other side of our surrender. He will bring us back to life. But not just any kind of life, not the old life, not just another chance, but a new kind of living. A kind of life that overcomes the curse of sin now and the power of death at the day of judgment. A kind of life that radiates with the light of the truth in the inside. A kind of life that is fueled by the loving connection, communion with the Holy Spirit of God that can never be quenched. By faith, we believe that out of death, there's a new birth that actually takes place within our hearts. A new identity that we're given to live in. And it's ours forever through faith. Now, not all of us here can remember, and if you've been baptized, maybe you don't remember the first moment that you believed. You know, maybe when faith led us to say yes, I want to die to my old life of sin and say yes to Jesus, but we don't know when that happened. You know, maybe you grew up around Christian, maybe the church or our Christian family, and you don't know when it happened. You know, as you watched your parents live their life, as you went to church or in Sunday school, when you learned to pray. You don't remember when you first decided to trust Jesus. And personally, I don't know, that's probably part of my story, is that I don't know myself when I made that choice, firstly. Some of us don't know when maybe you've come to faith later in life. You don't really know when you started trusting God or when it dawned on you that you had actually, in your heart, already said yes to the Lord. Was it at that service you were at last year? Was it during that season of trial when you really had to learn to trust God and surrender? Was it with your friends when they were praying with you or talking with you or teaching you about the Lord, when you read the Bible? But that's what baptism is then so important, because it's a moment meant to be carved out, meant to be done publicly, that involves a confession and a celebration that God has done something new on the inside. And I'm saying right now, right now, this is the reality of my life. And we need to remember this moment. That's why baptism just says all of the things that happen, whenever that moment happened, baptism is the moment you can say it was true. We need to remember what happened to us. Whether you were baptized 40 years ago or baptized last year, you need to remember your baptism. We all need to remember that death and resurrection that we by faith said yes to. Because every day we have to choose to live by that same faith. We have to choose to orient our lives. Now, by that, I don't mean every day you need to get up and be baptized. No more showers, only baths so you can go down and come up. No. I mean, you must remember who you are. Not the old person. You are someone new in Christ. You remember what you did and specifically how you entered in. How did you get here? For anyone that's owned a house, you know that in the last decade, housing prices around here have quadrupled, at least. And as a homeowner, I have to admit there's some pride in owning an asset that's performed so well. I mean, it's nice to have some equity in your life. And there's a certain amount of, maybe a decent amount of pride that I take in and comfort, that I take in the fact that I have this equity in my life from owning a home for over 12 years. And some of you, if you've owned a house for 30, 40 years, wow, what a performance. And yet, when I think about our house, I so easily and so quickly forget how I got it in the first place. See, I don't remember that it was 2008 and I was only a year out of school and Rachel was only months removed. And we'd been married for 3 years and we just found out we were expecting our first child, born in 9 months. We lived in under 600 square feet. We could barely afford to rent a bigger place, and we certainly could not afford a house. See, we didn't even think about it. Not only would we need a cosigner, we would need an entire down payment and probably help with all of the moving costs. See, we had saved all of our money and we had this sizable sum in our bank. We felt amazing about it. We had 40,000 pennies in our bank account. Maybe $400, maybe. We had nothing. But my parents were not only able to co-sign, but they were able to put down some money for us so that we could get into the market. And in under a month of looking, we entered into the housing market. We bought a house, and the rest is history. And salvation is a lot like that. See, after we've lived in grace for a time, it's easy to assume that everything that you have, where you are, the interest that the equity that you've built, the multiplication of the investment that you made is something that you've earned. That all the gains that you have are a result of the pain that you did when you put that money down. That you are, and everything, you are what you've achieved because of your own diligence. That you are your own, what you have is what is from all of your great planning, your own strength, your ingenuity. It's all as a result of your spirituality and your disciplines. Forgetting, just like I have, you only have the life you have because the great love of the Father has given you what you did not earn. That's the only reason we're here, is because God loved us with a love that was unconditional. See, John 1 famously reminds us of our origin story. Every hero has an origin story. And he says this, "But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor even the will of man, but of God." And I want to ask you, did you hear what he said? He said, to everyone, to all who did receive him and who believed in his name. What were the things that we did to enter into grace? How did you get into this new life of grace? You received and you believed. All you did was you welcomed the one who was waiting for you when you were starving and penniless and without hope. And he was waiting for you at the end of that dusty road with a forgiving embrace, with a robe and a ring, with a party ready to kick off. You received him. You just simply welcomed him. You didn't turn him away, and you believed him. You believed. You accepted it, what he had done for you. You surrendered to his love, and you accepted the gift of his grace. We believed that what seemed to be too good to be true actually wasn't too good to be true. It was reality. And yet, God doesn't stop there. See, John makes it clear to us that he then emphasizes, not only did we receive, and by receiving and believing, become children of God, the right to become children of God, full access, he then says, but you have to remember that when you entered in, there are three ways that you didn't enter in. He says there's three negatives. He says, remember, it was receiving and believing God's work, not according to your blood, nor the will of the flesh, nor the will of man that raised you up. You could restate that by saying, in the context of baptism, that we must remember that the act of dying to the old renders our life and the entirety of our old life completely powerless. We're saying, this is not who I am anymore. Thanks be to God. But a problem remains. We have to be raised up, don't we? And how can we be raised up? In that death to the old, you're then declaring, there is nothing in myself that will empower me to live. When we lower people into the waters of baptism, it requires effort on the person baptizing to pull them up. There's always that moment. No matter how buoyant the water is, you have to pull them up out of the water. And they can't help you. There's no self-effort. You're simply raised up by the hands of another. We're saying, I need a source outside myself. I need a new life, and I need a new power, and I need a new identity. So your old life has no standing and no influence anymore. And that's what faith is all about. Your new birth is not guaranteed because of your race or your bloodline or your standing. It's not relying upon your past efforts of works, whether they were good or they were bad. Not even according to your willpower or your desire. You have everything you have right now only because of God and his grace. Because his desire is good for you. Because his heart is open toward you. What pulls you out of that grave? What calls you? What lifts you from the water? Not your strength, but the strength of God. And that's what we're declaring today. See, remember, each morning, this is why baptism is, we do it publicly, and why we do it, why we enact this thing. We do it as a sign, so we can remember each morning before we open our eyes, before we enact our will on the day, before we do anything, before we have a second to think, all you have, you must remember, all you are, all you'll ever be is of God. Who you are is in Christ. Remember your baptism. You were baptized into his name. His name is quite literally upon you. That's what Matthew 28 says. Baptize them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. I read this week, there's some athlete, and there's lots of them. They're repping a wine they made. And they made this point. They said it in the ad. They said, I don't put my name on this lightly. If it wasn't the best, I would never put my name behind it. And we have to realize that that's who we are in Christ. We have the name of the Lord upon us. Because the love of the Lord is upon us, God's grace can rest. There's a new wine that celebrates a new covenant, a covenant sealed by the blood of Jesus. And we're raised up into that new life in the name of Jesus. And all we are is in him. We bear his name so that we will not die, but live. Anyone who dies in the waters of baptism will not remain buried, but they'll be raised up. Because they've died to sin, sin will no longer have dominion over them. Because they've received him now and believed in his name, they're under his blood and his life forever. And so I want to just encourage you this morning to take a moment as we pray. And if you've been baptized before, I want you to remember that moment. Maybe it was a pool. Maybe it was an old church. Who knows where it was? Maybe it was a river. It doesn't matter if you were 5 or 10 or 45. I want you to remember that who you are right now is according to grace, not according to your will, not according to your standing, not according to anything, but the power of God. And so I just want us to give thanks this morning. And I want to just celebrate that together. And I want to encourage you this morning, if you are thinking about trusting in the Lord, if you have begun even a little bit to extend your heart to God, that God is honoring that. God is open and God is waiting. God wants you to know who he is. Jesus wants you to have the life that he died to give you. He doesn't want you to live separate. He wants to call you home. He wants to welcome you into his family. And so we just want to bless you and know you're welcome here amongst us. We honor you. And we want to just agree together for God's work in your life. So let's pray. Father, we receive you this morning. We welcome your love towards us. We believe simply in your name. We believe what you've done. We believe, Lord, that you died and you were raised. And so this morning, God, we celebrate what you've done in our lives. We celebrate all of the great grace that you have, that you've lavished upon us. We remember, Lord, who we are is not according to our will or our power or our history or our race or our creed, our standing, our family. Lord, it's according to you and your love. And so this morning, God, we bless you. And I pray, Father, that you would allow faith to rise up in our hearts, faith to greet us, Lord, and to show us the way to your life. Bless your people. Bless them in your name.